agree it's a huge problem?
No.
Dealing with the usury interest. And what you're doing is, oh yeah, so where are you going to go to a shop and some? I'm saying, when Islam was implemented, into usury interest, that's why people don't understand the problem, because everyone's within it. So do you agree it's a huge problem?
No, I don't see that.
Interest is not a problem.
It's not a problem.
Interest is not a problem.
It's totally about issues.
Yeah.
So God approves of it, right?
No, yes. No. That's not the point. The point is that there's many rules that are not. They don't mean to be in the religious context. Like usury is bad. I agree. Like it's not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't follow that it has to be a religious prohibition. Number one.
Why not?
Number two. Well, why would it need to be? There's lots of things that are bad that are not prohibited. Two.
Okay, true.
There are laws that are not religious. Like there's a law in UK and France and whatever against usury. You don't need a religious prohibition for it. You don't need a religious.
What law of usury interest in UK?
Well, I don't know the name of the law, but like they are official interest rates.
Interest rates, how much you can charge more. But the fact of the matter is you're charging interest. So this is all on the principles of greed and oppression. Greed and oppression. A law which is based on your greed and oppression and weakness. Okay, so when you're in need.
Hang on, the concept of interest is just the cost of lending money, right? That's just a way of doing business, like any other way.
So if I take £1,000, I return £1,000, right?
Yeah, but there's a cost for lending that money, right?
You have enough money. So what?
You don't have enough money.
You're rich. I am in need.
You're saying you're going to go to a shop and just take things.
No. You are a rich person. You can spare me £1,000 or £1 million, right? I'm in need. No. I didn't beg. I borrow. So I said, look, I want to borrow £1,000 from you. So
hang on. So you're going to go to a shop and you're going to borrow something.
Not a shop. You see?
Yeah, but that's the thing.
No, what you're thinking is, I'll tell you why. You cannot think outside the box because the box is full of interest and usury. It's all emerged. It's like we are sunk within the box of usury interest. We are all sinking within it. That's why what I'm saying is, if you had a country where it operated without an interest, then I could give you an example, I can show you. But everyone and every country is actually dealing with the usury interest. And what you're doing is, oh yeah, so where are you going to go to a shop and some? I'm saying, when Islam was implemented in its political system, in its economic system, and it wasn't dealing with interest and usury, someone came to you, you are rich, why would you say, oh, you want to borrow £1,000, give me 1,700? Why?
Because
why would you? I don't.
Forget anybody belongs to the risk. So to guarantee against the risk.
But you're rich. You lose nothing. You're my friend.
Yeah, if you're a friend, but if you don't know someone.
No.
The bank doesn't know you.
So why am I going to go to someone that I don't know? I would go to people who are trustworthy.
That's a dumb idea. Just because doesn't allow usury.
Yeah. So there's a difference between interest rate and usury. Usury is an interest rate that is too high. That is.
No, I'm saying interest by itself. Interest by itself. Any interest.
Interest is just the cost of lending.
No. Any interest. Look. I am saying, if you are my friend and I go to you, you know what? Yeah, I am at risk. Like he's saying, oh, I'm at risk. You know, one second. You are a billionaire and I came for £1,000. What risk have you got?
Yeah, but I'm not. Yeah, but most people are not billionaires.
No, just 1 second. If you're a billionaire,
you shouldn't be a billionaire anyway. Most billionaires should give away a little bit.
No. You're not something. If you are a billionaire, meaning you're rich, £1,000. What is the risk involved in your £1,000? Giving money to lending money, not giving charity. I'm not begging you. I'm saying I want to borrow money. I will return.
Yeah, but I don't understand. Like, if you know the person, then yeah, you can lend the money.
So why would you want 1,700 back?
Well, because if you don't know the person, there is a risk.
I just tell you, I do know you. You do know me.
No, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about.
No, I'm talking about in real world where I know you.
When you go to the bank, do you know the bank?
No. There is no bank. You're thinking about current system. I'm not talking about current system. I'm giving you a model in which there is no usury and bank systems. There shouldn't be. I'm saying there shouldn't be.
What shouldn't there be?
I'm just the whole idea is.
If you know someone that can lend, that is a billionaire, they can lend.
What I'm saying.
If you don't know anyone that can lend you money, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the bank.
Two things.
The bank is going to.
Two things. When people borrow and lend from each other, that's within the community. I'm not going to go to somewhere now. land in Ohio, Ontario that I've never been. And
if you don't have a rich uncle,
today is not going to work because today's system is all, as you said, we're milking and what's what? We are already within sunken. We are sunken.
Okay, so to come back, actually,
No, let me clarify that. Let me clarify. I am proposing to you solutions to world politics, economics, and social systems, and crime and punishment systems. One second. I am giving you alternative systems of governance, alternative systems of economic structure, and so on. Alternative systems, not what you currently have.
Actually, I think
what would be a best system in which people can borrow and lend money, but they don't have to give interest? That will be more what?
Look at the
Humane, more compassionate, no greed, no oppression. That is what your heart, when you are a borrower, you would want. Would you go, okay, let me just test you. You go to a bank, two banks, this bank and that bank, with all due respect, no offense. He says, interest rate, 21%. He says, interest rate, 17%. Are you going to go to 21 or 17? 17. So you know 21 is robbing you more, even though it's a slightly few percent. You know exactly more. This brother says 0%.
Well, now I'm like, what strings attached? Like,
No string attached, 0%.
What's the catch?
No catch, 0%. No string attached, 0%. No interest. You'd say, I'm going to take that because you know all of that, you greedy individuals. No disrespect. So what I'm establishing, let's park that interest rate. Christianity does not have a practical solution to interest, does not have a practical solution to marriage and divorce, does not have a practical solution to drinking and alcohol consumption.
A lot of things are not problems. Like, you're making problems.
You know it's a problem.
I know you do a lot of it, but I'm also, you don't necessarily need to get rid of religious prohibitions. Like, for instance, so to come back to the point as to why that makes it an incomplete revelation, there's lots of things that have not been specified in the Quran that are still required to live in a society, right?
But Quran gives the foundational principles to affirm the laws and regulations, or derive, we call istinbat, making laws and regulations from the Quran and the Sunnah and the Ijma.
Like, one of the reasons Christianity has like fewer rules than the Quran is because it became a religion at the time of the Roman Empire.
Is it universal though?
The Roman Empire already had a lot of laws that therefore were not required in Christianity. It already had laws.
So God is happy with the laws of Caesar? Give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar? Right. That's what the problem is. But these laws are not.
There's lots. So to come back to like Christianity, the ways of life.
That's why I would not want to be a Christian. Give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but not to God. God should be the one who is the giver of law. God is the one al-hakim. God is the one who's judge.
Because we give to God and we
You're saying lots of philosophy. I'm saying the Quran and the Sunnah and the consensus of the companions and the Qiyas. These are the four. There's five maslah, maybe there's four main ones people know, are the sources of Islamic law and which we can derive laws, and you wouldn't say, oh, this is un-Islamic. But Christianity doesn't have that mechanism. Jesus,
like, I don't know any Christian that is like, usually it's not
about the kingdom of heaven, not the kingdom of heaven.
I know.
would you want to live in a society where the whole country is enslaved by interest? Whole country. Not just one individual, whole country. By IMF. Oh, you don't know? IMF, the bank. You happen to Rwanda and others, right?
You are living in that world today. And you
No. What I'm saying is the whole country was enslaved. Some of them are still enslaved. So imagine you're in an African country and you were living quite well, growing your own crops and so on. People came, colonizers came and did something about it. They said, you know what? We can make a lot of profit out of this one because it's a fertile land, right? I want you to grow coffee. So they start growing coffee. No more live crops, vital crops for their own food. So now they're growing coffee and they're buying for a small price. They haven't got any food to eat now. What do? They start buying their food, which they used to grow. They're saying, oh, if you want to buy our food, rice, potatoes, £1 become comes more. If you don't have money,
It's not Christian.
if you don't have money, look what happened. If you don't have money, no problem. You can borrow from us. Borrow £1 and give £1.90 back. They're enslaved, and they keep borrowing. Look, please. Look into IMF and how many countries are enslaved by IMF and all these things. So what we are saying is interest. I mean, you said you're into language and linguistics. Look into history of interest and how I am surprised. I am shocked. I am really shocked. You work in finance and you don't see the evil of interest.
There is evil of interest in usury, but interest and usury are not the same thing.
No, I'm saying interest.
Yeah, but why? Like, interest is just the cost of lending money.
It's not just the cost.
It is. Literally, what you do with it is different. There's lots of bad people that do bad things with it, but it's also incredibly powerful. It's built up.
Okay. He says 21% and 17%. Who's better?
Okay, so
No. Why is he better then?
look at it the other way. You don't know anything about the person, and you're a person that
Don't go to them.
No.
Go to someone who you know.
No, you have money. There's a person that comes to you. You don't know anything about them. Would you lend them money?
I'll find out about them.
Well, how would you find out about that?
It's the community. We're living in community.
So the beauty of interest is that I don't need to know anything about you. I just give you money. You will pay me back something.
Why more?
Therefore, I don't need. But that's the risk you're taking.
I am saying.
What do you mean? How does interest affect you? Well, there's a risk for you lending out money.
He doesn't.
You take.
You know what? He takes the money. He doesn't pay back.
Yeah, that's the risk. That's the risk. Sometimes it happens.
No. He doesn't give you any money back.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So
I'm missing it.
So I don't.
£1,000 you bought, and you're supposed to give 1,700, but you don't give any. You give zero money, zero. So how is this? How are you protected?
That's called the loss rate. And so in banking, so let's say you lend to 1,000 people, right? You lend to 1,000 people £1,000 each. Some of them are going to pay you back. Some of them are not going to pay you back like that person, and that's fine.
How is it protecting you from him?
Well, that's the thing. You take that into account. That's the cost of interest. The interest that of the 1,000 loans that I make, 10% are not going to pay me back.
It's only one individual, not 1,000 people.
What's that?
Just one.
Yeah, the individual. No. So there are procedures, of course, but loss rate is included in the interest. That's why you pay.
Okay. Would you live in a world of in interest?
But you would live in a world of interest.
No. Would you prefer to live in a world without interest?
Well, I think that the world without interest works only if you know people very well. It doesn't work. It doesn't scale.
Simple question. If there was a possible world in which there was no interest, and current world where there's interest, which world would you prefer to live in?
I mean, I don't know actually, because that means that.
Okay, let's leave it there. You don't know?
No.
Where would you want to live, brothers and sisters?
No, but a lot of things will be
No interest world. Fine.
A lot of things will be possible. I'd like to get back because I feel like it's not a particularly interesting kind of place. We were talking about Christianity and we kind of went on the interest. So you're saying that Christianity doesn't have any of the answers to these particular problems, but I mean, we live in a world where you've got lots of Christians that live a Christian life that don't get into drink and driving, don't have issues with interest.
Some people do. What's the solution for them?
Some people.
What's the solution for them?
Well, I mean, there are laws that are not religious that have to do with that.
Why would you need someone else's law? So, for example, what you're saying is, okay, I've got your name, okay? Camille.
Yeah.
Camille. If Islam was implemented across the globe, you'd say, yeah, I would be happy, right? In principle, because you don't mind living under any law other than God's law. So Islam is implemented in Britain, Islam is implemented in America, in France, in Europe, and in all the world, you would be happy in living under Islamic law, right?
Well, I mean, no, because I have some issues with Islamic law.
Now, here's the problem. You are happy not following and saying, we don't need to have a religious law from God. I would follow any law that is implemented in any country. I'm giving you Islam, and you're saying, no, I will not be happy. So, do you see the problem?
No.
Do you see the problem?
No. So,
which law are you happy with?
No, so I don't have a problem with like Sharia as a principle necessarily. I have a problem with an issue with specific laws within Islam.
So what you're saying is, you do have a problem with laws, and you have a happiness with certain laws. So again, when you say I'm happy with certain laws, which God doesn't give, that's what you're saying. Sharia law as a package you're not happy with because certain laws you disagree with. Yeah. So it's to do with what you agree and what you disagree with. What's the basis for that? You are now becoming the legislator. What you consider to be right and wrong, not God, but you. You have put yourself in the position of a legislator legislator. God knows what is best for us. You're saying, no, he doesn't have to give laws.
But so I think my position on that is that a lot of the laws that I disagree with, I don't really understand. Because the Quran actually makes sense. Broadly speaking, when you read it, there's not that many.
What do you disagree with?
So the Sunnah and the Hadith, I think that's kind of my...
No, what are the laws of the Islamic legal system that you disagree with?
Well, I mean, slavery, for instance.
Where is slavery? Slavery doesn't happen. The Quran...
But in a state, that would be...
No, slavery has been all universally... There's something called the maslaha.
Yeah, what's that?
Maslaha is very difficult to translate. It's like the welfare of communities and so on, right? So when you have international agreements done in outlawing slavery, Islam would not say, oh, I want slavery back, because they all agreed to abolishment of this kind of things.
So if there's an international agreement for interest, because interest is necessary for the worldwide financial system, what is Islam's position on it?
There's a difference between the outlook of what Islam considers to be what is totally detrimental and what is like already eventually be weaned off. Eventually will be curbed down or totally removed from the world affairs. Slavery, some form or another, as you can see, it still was happening. So when it diminishes, Islam is not going to say, oh, let's introduce slavery back. But usury is something that is totally going to dismantle the human fabric.
Usury is prohibited anywhere.
No. Slavery, which happened at that time before when Islam was implemented, even though slavery was rampant everywhere else, Islam incorporated these individuals, didn't call them like slaved up, but they incorporated within the society, give them their rights, their protection and so on, and their means to seek freedom. So it encourages all the time, oh, you've done something wrong?
Slavery incorporated and not usury, because usury, I mean, interest rates exist at a time as well. So.
God is wise. He knows which is...
Okay?
Slavery wasn't okay. Slavery, the mechanism was there. Slavery should eradicate by itself as time goes. All means and resources are provided. This brother commits a mistake. Quran says, "Fakku raqaba," free a slave to atone for his sin. You've done something, free a slave. Done something, free a slave. So Islam isn't something like get more slaves, but free a slaves. A slave who can teach, out of their teaching, they can earn their freedom. All about this drive to freedom to slavery. But because of in God's wisdom that is going to take a long time, it's not something like you can do straight away, like alcohol. To give you like alcohol. No, alcohol.
Why is alcohol wrong and not slavery?
No, alcohol didn't get banned straight away in day one.
Yeah, I agree with that.
There was a phase of transition.
Okay, so, but why?
Likewise, slavery has been left to this kind of transition. God is wise.
There's no prohibition of slavery. There's no prohibition of slavery.
Does the Quran encourage slavery?
Well, apparently, yeah.
Where?
Well, I mean, it refers to
evidence.
Where does it encourage slavery? The word is encourage.
Well, what do you mean by encourage?
Encourage is promoting slavery.
Well, yeah.
Like, take a slave. Have more slaves.
Yeah, I think it does say in some. I can't remember where, but it does say, oh, you can take those people as slaves. I mean, that makes you the people you conquer. No?
You have options when the war is happening. The prisoners of war. You can either you can kill them, you can free them of ransom, and so on and so forth, or you can take them captives. Right. That's not encouraging slavery. That is the means of incorporating within the society to put them in their communities back so that they can earn the right to be free again. They can be utilized in society.
Well, it is saying you can take them as slaves. Yes.
No, that was one option of taking them in so that they can be freed. Well, there are places. No. There were occasions where people are freeing them. This is what they're freeing them. But you have to take.
Not take them as slaves to sleep with them.
No. We are talking about a situation at that time in which how do you deal with all this slaves within the system? You free them. Okay.
No. You
one second. Okay. Imagine a slave. You freed them. Then what?
What do you mean by what?
Yeah. Now this slave is free, and then what?
Yeah.
How is this slave going to live? He has no property, nothing.
Well, yeah. What's the Quran's?
Let's understand your. Let's understand.
Free a slave. So when the Quran says you can free a slave if you've done a bad deed, well, what's the solution to that?
Yeah. So when you free your slaves, you will give them the mechanisms in which, because the slave will have resources given to them. But you're saying just free them.
Well, no, I'm saying don't take them as slaves.
Right. So now you're saying, look, international. This is the international law. Like war happens, and you have all this prisoner of war. You're saying, oh, not only you free them, you give them food and bedding and a job and a lot. Is that what you expected at that time to happen immediately?
I mean, I don't know. What would you
Was it?
expect?
I'm saying that wasn't practical at a societal time.
Then why take them as like? Why not take just as
Because
prisoners and
rehabilitation, reform, giving them chance to an opportunity to make them hear about the Quran, learn about Islam. In fact, this is what happened. The slaves became the rulers at one point, the Mamluks. They became rulers of the Muslim lands. Why? Because not only they became Muslims, they were ruling the Muslims. So there's a whole kind of mechanics that's going on. What I'm saying is, there are certain things in the wisdom of God that God allows things to happen. He doesn't simply just say, that's it, alas. Because God knows how things can be reformed. We are talking about Christianity. In Christianity, what is the rule for slavery? You can beat them? Can you beat them?
In Christianity,
Okay. Can you beat them?
if you will.
What does Paul say? What does Paul say about slaves?
So that is why we don't take slaves in Christianity.
In Christianity, what does Paul say about slaves? Do you know?
Sorry,
What does Paul say about slaves? What's the slave and a slave master? How is the relationship
For
going to be?
example, Paul tells
How is the relationship going to be between a slave master and a slave?
them slaves as themselves. So Paul says that as well. He also says that you obey the master, right? Confused. Don't forget that
Heckling will happen.
Christianity is the religion
So now,
by which
does Paul say free all the slaves? Does Jesus say free all the slaves? Slave? It's okay.
Listen.
In time of Christ, there are many. It's okay, brother. I'm going to ignore the heckler anyway.
You mind, sorry.
I do mind. I do mind. Heckler is something that I don't speak to.
Answer, right?
You can go and watch DawahWise for this heckling.
What the Bible says about
I'm not speaking to
slavery,
you.
particularly Christianity.
Have some respect.
Very
I'm speaking
simple.
to you.
We follow both what is written in the Bible and the
At the
actions
time of Christ, were there
Unless
slaves?
you can find a single slave
there
that
slaves?
Christ owned, then you're completely out of luck.
Were there slaves?
When we go to Muhammad
there
and
were
the
slaves,
Sahaba,
but
they had slaves.
Christianity-
What does Christ say about slavery?
Christ said that we're all free in Him.
Do you have a mind, or he thinks you are one without one?
Greek, all are free in Christ.
Does he consider you one without a mind?
Christianity is about freedom. No.
Is this how Christians treat women?
Yes, it is. So when
He's saying yes, it is.
Yes, you have the answer. Jump right in.
Yeah. It's too late now, bro.
Hey.
It's too late. It's too late.
Can I ask you, sir?
Awesome.
I don't think this is how Christ
Is this how
taught
Muslims treat women?
to treat
Just
women.
talk at them all the time.
I was-
And that's what they're gonna do.
Okay,
There you go. There you go. Calm down. Let's reset.
No.
Really?
I'm speaking
Is
to
that how
Camille.
Muslims behave? They don't answer questions to women. I
You
see.
say that Jesus was not for the world, but the Father said, what does it say, John 3:16? What does it say?
For God so loved the world that He gave
What
His
did
only begotten
Christ
Son,
preach
that whoever
about
believes
slavery?
in Him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Alhamdulillah.
So
Come on
Jesus
now.
came for the whole world. You need to
Perhaps
answer like that.
you can find out a bit more, right?
Okay.
So now let's to wrap up. Christianity
This is how Muslims behave.
doesn't have a political, economic, crime and punishment system. It is not a complete package of life.
So, Christ
A
said
universal
that is
law,
freedom.
a universal religion of God.
That is why Islam is
I can't hear you. You can tell him off. You can tell him off. Right. So, a universal message from God should be a universal package, a complete package. That's what the Quran says. In Christianity, you don't have a complete package of crime and punishment system, for example. When, for example, someone commits an injustice, a crime against your family, a murder, God forbid, for example, you would say, I'm happy if I was living in an Islamic system to go to Islamic law to have the law and punishment enacted. I'm happy if I was in a Roman court, if I was living in a Roman court, because you don't have a law of God from
Islam,
the Bible.
Islam, for instance, Islam in, say, the UK, you submit to the law of the land.
Islam doesn't say that Muslims should live their life. It says Muslims should live a life in which if your life is being prevented from following, you're going against the laws of God, then you make hijrah, you make migration to a land where it can be. You can exercise your religious freedom and so on. So we are here as out of contract within this country, and Islam says obey the contracts. But that doesn't mean we will sit there and say, you know what, Islam says, you know what, anyone speaks a corner, they should be hanged. I would be speaking against it. So
would you? Because if Muhammad was here, he would probably agree with that. So I guess Muhammad was here.
I don't know why a heckler always have to interrupt. So Camille,
That's the issue.
what I'm saying is, because Islam already has a solution,
The Sunnah, which is great.
anything that people have which is not a best solution, I would offer them the alternative. In fact, that's why some Muslims are trying to open up the minds of people and saying, look, there lies the solution. You know, look into the alternative solutions which Islam provides, and that's where you should be leading towards. If you want happiness in society, this is Islam provides that.
If you have Christ, you have nothing more.
So let's talk about a different topic because I feel like we've had to cover a lot of things. I'd like to come back to the Sunnah, right?
Yeah.
And the good on them.
Yeah.
So the Sunnah, and so I mean, to some extent, I've read the Quran. It kind of, you know, most of it makes sense. There are some things that are a bit controversial, but by and large, I think the thing that most people have an issue with is in the Hadith and not in the Quran. So, what's the rationale for following the Hadith? Because from what reading the Quran, there's several passages that says the Quran is a complete book. It doesn't need anything else. It doesn't need to be Hadith. And even those passages say, do not trust the Hadith. Basically, do not trust anything that came from the forefather. You know, there shouldn't be any traditions like after all that kind of
Yeah, Quran says, follow the Prophet, obey the Messenger, ati Allah wa ati Rasul.
Follow the message. Follow the message.
No, follow the Messenger, because the Messenger has come litibyan, to make tibyan, to make clarification, to expound the message. So then the Quran says, pray. God has inspired him, taught him how to pray. So for example, if I say to you, for example, pray, what comes to your mind? Praying how? Praying like this? Yeah. So you don't know the modality. So when the Quran gives you like commands, like pray, the Prophet says, pray. No. Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Pray as you see me praying. So he prays.
Why did God send prophet?
Ruku, kneeling, prostration, sitting down, and making taslim salam at the end. All of this modality, you can't just speculate and come up with it. So through divine.
If you read the Quran, it is described. Like he described the standing, the bending, and the prostrating, right? All of that is in the Quran.
The Quran talks about various aspects of the prayer. It doesn't simply just say pray, but in terms of like how many units of prayer am I going to pray in sunrise time or morning time? 2, 5, 3, 2.5, 6.
Yeah, no, so why would you need more than one?
No. God sends a prophet and a messenger. Look, let's try to go very basics. God says, worship me. Okay? He doesn't give you anything. He doesn't tell you anything. And this brother says, how do I worship God? Okay, let me just worship God by barking like a dog. Woof, woof, woof. You might disagree, so no. You have to meow like a cat. Meow, meow. And that's going to be worship. He's going to say, no. What nonsense is this? How do you worship God? There's going to be all these differences. People say, no, there will be no unity among people how to worship.
Why is that an issue?
Okay. He says, you have to bark like a dog to worship God. Because that's how God is happy with. You're wrong. You're wrong. By meowing like a cat, and that's worshiping God, this is wrong. You should bark like a dog.
So even in Islam today, there are lots of different, like if you look at the Shia and the Sunni, they don't pray in the same way, right?
We can go into the differences and we can find where the sources of differences are. So all had to be based on a revelation to given to the Prophet as the Quran or given to him as he's teaching the Sunnah. So we realize the importance of God not simply leaving us in darknesses of saying, okay, do this and not telling exactly the modality of it. That's why God doesn't send a book only from heaven, loves and kisses, there you go, the Quran. He sends a prophet who lives the Quran, implements the Quran in his life, shows how to implement the laws and regulations. So the wife of Prophet Muhammad, Aisha, if I'm not mistaken, described the Prophet as a walking Quran because he is now manifesting the Quranic teaching, the principle and guidances. So the Prophet explains and expounds. So when God says something and the Prophet explains it, his explanation is not in the Quran because the Quran is only the speech of God, not the speech of the Prophet. So now I want to know what the Prophet explained. I have the Quran, which is from God, but I want to know how the Prophet explained it in his actions, in his deeds, in his practice. Where do I go?
The Quran itself says that it is perfect and doesn't need anything.
No, the Quran says it's completed. It says by sending a prophet. That's part of the completed package. It says God. I'm going to ignore the heckler because when you look at the Quran says, okay, he has sent his prophet. He is going to expound expound the message.
These are the words of a country.
Yeah, لتبين.
Commission of prophets.
It's a tibyan.
Yeah.
So the Quran explained the Prophet's role is to make explanation. لتبين.
What verse is that?
I'm not going to explain to you, heckler. Go and find it yourself. But if you ask me, I can tell you, right?
Okay, because actually, I do have some.
There you go. I'll show it to you.
Bring it
Not
on.
because of him, because you asked.
Awesome. That's fine.
Thank you.
Great to see a source every once in a while. And I'll get Surah 12 verse 1. And then verse 2 as well.
Anyway, nobody talk to you.
Why are these hecklers so desperate to disturb every of my talk? Before I do that, I don't go to your talks to.
Following the sunnah.
No.
That's what I'm doing.
Why are Christians heckling?
Israel breaks apart.
Yeah, thank you. Surah 4
Look,
verse 59.
I'm going to show him.
Okay, well, what you got?
The hecklers, right, in the back. Okay, one second.
What's you got?
He's good.
I'm going to show you. To be one. This is one there.
Yeah, but this isn't telling you.
The one there.
So you can recognize when they come.
That's one there. He's probably not here today. And he was. Let me see.
I've seen him before on videos. Yeah.
Yeah, this-
Okay.
Look, I have a folder called album called Heckless.
Yeah, but you see, your side. Yeah.
Yeah.
That means that you have to.
Just to show you these people come and destroy
I
everything.
mean, that's kind of the point that speakers.
Yeah, thank you. Right, so the Quran, I want to show it to you.
Who empower over you. So basically, according to this
Yeah.
right, you have to be, you have to have a hadith, right, for both Muhammad as well as those who are in authority over you, because you're commanded to obey both. So do you have any hadith for those who are in authority
Because
over you?
verses 6 that says
Yeah, but there's also, so there's
the book is full of detail. We didn't
So,
leave
like-
anything out of the book, that kind of stuff.
This is what people miss. The detail is by sending a prophet and messenger. It says, okay, he send you, look,
that tells you to follow.
with clear signs and books, we send the messengers, and we have sent also down unto you, O Muhammad Sallam, the reminder and the advice that you may explain clearly to men what is sent down to them, that they may give thought. So his role is to expound the Quran.
So yeah, but Jesus, when he was...
No, we're not talking about Jesus. I'm talking about why we need the Sunnah, the Hadith, right? I'll tell you what the Hadith is. So the Quran is categorically saying part of the package of completing the Quran is by having a prophet and messenger giving a role to explain this message in detail so that you have a complete package. And what does the prophet...
Why does it say in Surah 6:38, we did not leave anything out of the book?
So for example,
Exactly.
Muhammad, right? So
This is in the book about the messenger prophet.
Yeah, but so if...
It'll be too long, too much.
No, brother. I think you're missing. You're missing the subtle point there. The principle is God made a package of universal guidance in which there's a role of the prophet and the messenger to expound the message, to clarify the message, to explain the message. This is part of his mechanics of completing his guidance. When he says, I have not left anything, that thing of having the role of the prophet is that part of that package. It's not outside that package. It's inclusive of the package. Think about it and reflect on it.
Okay, well, I mean, there's
So,
another problem with the hadith, which is a lot of them contradict either the Quran or
any hadith which contradicts the Quran cannot be a true authentic hadith. Because authentic hadith cannot contradict revelation, the Quran. Because the Quran is the most reliable revelation without a shadow of doubt.
I agree with that.
If you have a hadith which contradicts it, really contradicts it, the scholars will first look into it. What does it contradict? Is it because the people who are narrating it, they have weaknesses, imperfect memory, they're a person who's a liar? Is it because it's made up? Or is it because it's misunderstood? Yeah? So they will try what we call reconciliation. If they cannot reconcile it, this hadith goes against the Quran, it cannot be authentic. Yeah? Because the hadith has two parts. One is the chain of narration, and one is the text, the matan. Yeah? Isnad and the matan. Isnad analysis, or the narrative or narrators, is making sure that the hadith is going back to the Prophet. But I heard from him, he heard from her, she heard from him, and eventually goes back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's no inqida, there's no disconnect. Yeah, it goes all the way back to the Prophet.
Yeah, so I understand the principle behind it, but the reality is that they were written down 200 years.
No. Polemics. Christian orientation fundamentalist polemics.
Even Muslim sources.
No.
So when were they written?
That's okay.
When were they written?
They were the hadith.
Not the
I'm talking about the hadith.
Yeah.
Some people, companions, they themselves said, "Oh, Prophet, can I write something from your hadith?" And they got it written down. At his time, at his presence, in his presence, he got it written down. These hadiths were compiled and recompiled, and they got incorporated with larger collections later. So, for example,
there's some hadith themselves that said that the Prophet didn't allow people to write them down.
The hadith which says, look, when the Quran is being revealed, don't copy anything else from me apart from the Quran. That was initially to making them understand that the Quran has to be kept separate as a revelation. When they got used to it, later the prohibition by the Prophet got lifted. Now you can write hadith. Because initially, if people write, look, they weren't have like a paragraph ends here, new paragraph. It was just writing whatever they could materials. Shoulder blade of a camel, the bark of a tree, anything and everything they could write. So they would write, and at the end, a word breaks down. They're not going to say, I'm going to write the next word, whole of it, right? No. Let's say a word is banana, for example, make any language. But they'll just write ba, they will not hyphen it, and start with na at the second line. Because they didn't want to waste space, because it was so precious. Writing material wasn't invented at that time in terms of paper. Paper came much later. When paper, So when you have the Quran being written and so on in a precious material, you don't want to incorporate it with their own commentary, Prophet's commentaries and his teaching, so that they can be all pure revelation. Yeah, that was the initial necessity of not writing anything else. The prohibition was lifted. You will find that in the writing as well. And as the prohibition was lifted, some people wanted, can I write this? And they wrote down. So many people were writing the collection. They had many connections called, like not only like collections of that you heard of Bukhari and Muslim. Prior to this, you had like musnads, and you had so many sunans. Yeah.
So you're saying that prior to the Bukhari Muslim, what's that?
There are many others.
Some that were written down.
We now have extant hadith collections, pre-Bukhari, for example, and you can compare.
But a lot of them were potentially fabricated. That's why some of them they were that whole.
For example, Sahifa Hammam ibn Munabbih, the number of collections, pre-Bukhari, and you can compare with Bukhari, and you can compare with Muslim and Ahmad bin Hanbal, and you can find all of them in those later collections. Every single one of them. Okay, so it is a polemics that Quran didn't have any manuscripts for the last 200 years or 250 years. Neither were the hadith. As time went more and more, we found manuscripts. Like recently, they have published a biography of the Prophet, Musa bin Uqba. It wasn't known that it would survive, but now it survived. It's published in Arabic, and guess what? Oriental scholars into a race to translate it. So they will translate it soon. Previous to that, we have Sirat ibn biography of the Prophet. We now have an earlier biography
That was written
that is now is extant, published in Arabic, and now being translated in English.
Well, you're saying it's a biography that was written prior to the hadith, to the first.
No, what I'm saying, many works from antiquity, of Islamic antiquity, got incorporated in later works, or they got lost and they got destroyed. Many libraries, Islamic libraries, got destroyed by Genghis Khan or whatever. So many people. I mean, it was like the whole the river was like literally black by the ink of the books, and no wonder 2 different places someone came up with calculus at the same time. Independently. We know what happened. They found some manuscripts here and there, and they're saying it's my own. People should do that, claim their own work. So what I'm saying is, the books of hadith, there are many books that were written, they were lost, found, rediscovered, reincorporated, but the process continues to sift, to filter the hadith from the authentic, from the weak, and so on. So they categorized it.
So what do you make of hadith, even within, I think, Bukhari?
So within Bukhari, Islamic scholarship agrees that these are authentic hadith.
Yeah, but if you have hadith that contradict each other, what do you make of that?
Give me an example.
So for instance, on doing wudu, there's one that says you have to wash once, another says you have to wash twice, and the third that says you have to wash three times. So which one is it?
The way it's reconciled is the Prophet ﷺ didn't say you must only do thrice or twice. Various times it made wudu in different times, in different ways, and it says so 3 times is what we call the sunnah. The Prophet did 3 times, but if you do 1 time, it's sufficient. 2 times is okay. 3 times is the sunnah of the Prophet. So at certain times in his life, the Prophet did actions with these divergences. It's okay to wash just once your hand or thrice and so on and so forth. It doesn't mean they're contradictory. So, for example, they're not contradictory. That's why even in prayer, you'll find the raising the hands of the prayer. Scholars say at later times, he may just have done it once in the beginning, and that's why a large group of Muslim jurists, they say, okay, you don't have to do what's called Raf al-Yadayn in every part of the Salah. But we have authentic hadith for this, that he did this. So how do they reconcile it? It's by going to the context, the historical context, and see what other companions learned from the Prophet and how they practice and so on. So in Medina, for example, you have a whole principle where it says, the people of Medina, their actions, because the Prophet lived there in Medina for a long time. How did he do some things? So Imam Malik, for example, a jurist, who incorporated part of his legal text, Muwatta, and his teaching based on this precept that actions of people of Medina is following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So if you have something totally contradictory, this is where the scholars have to reconcile and say you can't have both of them right. And there are certain hadiths sometimes they will find 2 contradictory hadiths and you have to weigh one for the other. You cannot reconcile it. So this is a whole science of verification by looking at the chain and looking at the actual text itself. And we are so much grateful for the Islamic scholarship that they have done so much work so that we can be sure that this is what the teaching the Prophet left behind. Compared to other religious tradition, you didn't even know. There's no connection. There is no chain of narrations. There is no conservation and preservation of this teaching. But we have, for example, even when the Prophet ﷺ was silent for 30 seconds, for example, even that is recorded. His silences, not his words, his approvals, his disapprovals, commands or prohibitions, even his silence. We know even the Prophet, whether he ate chicken or not. Chicken was very rare. But we have hadith, very rare, but it's there. People preserved it. You'll be surprised. So this kind of teaching that we have, Muslim scholars, they even wrote books just talking about books which are totally fabricated, so that Muslims can be aware of it, because there were groups of people who wanted to have some kind of benefit, either politically or otherwise, saying, you know what, God said you should make him the Khalif, your successor, so obey him as your ruler. They started fabricating it because they wanted him to and so on. But when they started saying, okay, name your man, who said that to you? Where did you hear this from? And they started finding either you did not hear from him directly, so it's just hearsay, or the person who's saying in the chain is a well-known liar in the community. So the Muslims started categorizing, writing biographies of the people and saying, okay, we know whether he even suffered in his later age memory failure, for example. This is natural to have loss of memory. So they will categorize, look, these are the hadith that he said before he had memory failure, these are afterwards. So we'll be very careful about those ones later. Even to that level of precision. So there are many people, one namely I would say, read about his life and his works. Jonathan Brown, an English person, an American person, of course American English, became a Muslim by studying Bukhari, and that was his thesis. Because of the rigorous science that went behind to preserve the message of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
I mean, it feels, so all that to me is like, it's a bit like saying, when I look at the hadith, I'm like, it's like reading about the life of Jesus, right, basically. I mean, because they're both prophets, and it's like, you want to follow their example, and what they did was what you want to try and emulate. But there's a difference in emulating and doing exactly to the letter what was good. And so from what you're saying, it sounds like it's better to try and be as close to the Prophet's life as possible, but it's okay to not always be.
No, we should take the Prophet as our role model. Number one principle.
Yeah, but on the specification of like how many times to wash your hands.
No. The Prophet already told us how to do it. So whether your preference is once or thrice, wise? That's something that the jurist would decide and make a decision. No, jurist. They don't know. The jurist will say, look, Prophet, in most of his lives, if you look at all the narrations from all the authentic people, of the most senior scholars of the companions and the students, they said, I'm just giving an arbitrary example, doesn't have to be Urdu. And they said, look, they all said 3 times, and you have few individuals who are also reliable, they said once, preference will be given to those ones. So there's a preferential understanding of law based on a lot of things as well.
Yeah, but you're saying all of these are acceptable, like, so all of the various sects within Islam
No,
today.
not sects. There are sects which contradicts.
But so all of these are still considered.
So when it comes to the legal schools, for example, okay, as long as it's based on authentic hadith and authentic teaching, the scholars may have a disagreement. The will say, we might consider you're wrong, but the possibility that you can be right too, right? They don't take away the possibility.
Yeah. What would you make of a Muslim that only follows the Quran?
They're going against the Quran.
Why?
Because the Quran says follow the Prophet.
Because the pillars of the faith in Islam, right? It's the prayer, it's the shahada, it's the pilgrimage, all of that, right? So if a Muslim follows all these, how to say he's not Muslim?
But he says, believing in Allah, how do you know about Allah? How do all the explanation is Quran and the Sunnah. If you want to pray, Salah, how do you pray? The Quran and the explanation in the Sunnah. If you want to make charity, how much do you give? In the example of the Quran says, give charity, the Prophet says, this is how much you give. If you want to make pilgrimage to the house of Allah, house of God, how do you do the pilgrimage? Which one do you go to? How many circumambulation do you do? Which step?
Why is it important? That's what I don't
Imagine I go to Mecca and start jumping around. Is that how you do a
Let
Hajj?
me give you an example. In Christianity, you have prayer, right? But there are some ways to pray, but none of them are, it's not like one prayer is better than the other one. There are some guidance, but none of them are like mandatory. Do you see what I mean? So, and
Which way, how does God, Allah, accept our prayer? Which modality? I go to Mecca, in front of the Kaaba, I start jumping up and down. It's not my Hajj.
Obviously, there are things that are going to be more or less, you don't want to be disrespectful, right? But within...
No, I'm jumping up and down. In my ecstasy, this is my Hajj.
Singing.
You would say, look, what nonsense is this? I'm saying,
I mean, at the same time,
the reason,
running around...
no, running around is not. Everything rotates around the world. When you go into the Kaaba and then you rotate around, you will feel the connection. First time I've been, it's something that you cannot describe with words. You have to experience it. There's some kind of electromagnetism is drawing towards you, and you feel the connection. It's not describable. I mean, you might find it strange, but speak to people who have been and are not Muslims. So that is something that one needs to experience. This. What I'm saying is, this manasik or this the particular way of doing it, who can tell us better, the Prophet or my speculation? How to perform the modality of worshipping God?
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of speculation involved in what the Prophet actually said.
No. We leave the speculation. For example, if somebody enacts a law, say, you know what?
There's so much speculation that they are today. There's a lot of different ways that are acceptable.
They all need to be based on the evidence. No evidence.
Disagree about the evidence.
No. If you have no evidence and the weak evidence, you would say this is not how you should be doing it.
Then why are there different ways to pray in Islam today?
Because we have the Prophet who did this in these ways.
Yeah, so he did it in different ways, so different ways are acceptable.
Yeah, but which ways do you do flap your hands like this? No one does that. Right. So if you look at Islamic jurists, Islamic jurists don't have a problem if you pray like a Shafi or a Hanbali or a Hanafi, for example.
Yeah.
Only the extremist people are saying, no, you can't pray like that. But if you can demonstrate through evidence and proof from the Sunnah of the Prophet.
If you were to read the Quran, because the Quran talks about references, the positions, right, of the prayer. The references standing, the bending, the prostrating. So if you were to just follow that, that's...
It doesn't give the units.
So why do you need units? Like, if it's just one unit part...
It's not one unit. You need to know exactly...
because you have a particular way to pray.
How to pray? I'll give you the reason why.
Yeah.
When Adam and Eve, peace be upon them, when they committed the sin, did they use their own words and say, God, we're sorry? Do you know the teaching in Islam. God taught them the words of forgiveness. You say, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. God taught them, they used these words to pray for forgiveness. So even from the very beginning, our father and mother have been taught a particular way of connecting with God. So when God wants us to connect with Him, you can't just devise by yourself by speculating. That's the reason why prophets and messengers are sent who will explain to them. خُذُوا عَنِّي مَنَاسِكَكُمْ, the Prophet said, how to do Hajj. He even said, this is what he says, take from me all the rituals of Hajj, how to do Hajj.
Okay, so come back to Christianity for a minute.
Yeah.
So before the Quran was revealed, Christians were praying, and they were praying in a way that's not the same as the Muslims today, right?
Jesus did.
Remember, every community before, they had the same message, but the modality, rules and regulations may be different.
Yeah.
So if they were praying like, for example, I don't know, say they were praying like this, right? I know they weren't, not, because the Jewish people are actually praying prostrating, right? So whatever they were praying, this was something acceptable to God at that time, because God wanted for them to have in that modality.
Have changed. That's why I don't really understand. I'm like, God can specify something.
God can specify the modality. Out of this,
Why he changed?
I'm giving the example. The Prophet ﷺ was praying towards Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem, as the Qibla. He was hoping that you could pray towards Kaaba, because Kaaba is the first house built for the worship of God. First house, not Jerusalem, Kaaba. So he's hoping if I can pray and make the Qibla, as Allah made this Qibla, he said, okay, turn towards the Qibla, to Bayt al-Haram, the Kaaba, and pray. And he also made this also as a test for people. There are some people, they were now questioning like, why this, why that? Because God wants us also to be obedient to Him, and He does this by certain commands and prohibitions. For example, can men wear gold? Muslim men, can they wear gold? No. But some men like gold. You see some gangsters or pop stars, gold all over. Like how do they should be like that, like so much jewelry. They like gold and so on. But in Islam, man cannot wear gold. So even though you have desires, it's a test whether you follow the laws of God or not, but not wearing gold. Not having silk, for example. But women can wear gold and silver and so on and so forth. And silk, women. So there are many things in Islam Allah gives us for a test and see whether we are actually obedient servant of Him, or we just simply gotta go with the flow. Right? Go with the flow. Islam doesn't want people to go with the flow. Like, okay, Islam seems to be winning, so let me join this party so I can be okay. No, there were wars that Muslims lost. So at that time, what do you expect? The people who joined the party because this is the winning party, if they don't stick to it with their faith that this is the truth, and they say, no, I'm going to go to another party who's the winning party, then they didn't have faith. So faith needs testing. God in His wisdom created us, and He gave us purpose of our life is to be tested whether we deserve to go to heaven or hell. He could have created and put us straight into heaven, straight into hellfire, those who deserve it. If you go to heaven after you were created immediately, would you complain in this happiness and bliss? You wouldn't complain. Even if you said like, I didn't do anything good, why did you give me grace? You would not complain. You'd be so happy, and I wouldn't complain, you wouldn't complain. That's for sure. But imagine an individual put straight into hellfire and says, God, why are you punishing me? He or she says, I haven't done anything. God says, but I knew that if I gave you the freedom, the intellect, the faculty of choice, I knew beforehand that you're going to exercise it wrongly, and you're going to be the daughters of hellfire because of your own choice. But instead of putting towards all this test, what's the reason? I put you direct into hellfire. But they will complain, but I haven't done anything, we haven't done anything. Well, how can you? You're so unjust. To remove this accusation of injustice to God, God has placed us here temporarily so that we can be testing ourselves whether we are indeed deserving to have God God's grace to go to Jannah, His paradise, or to be in
I
punishment.
don't dispute that. It's just that a lot of things that just sound very arbitrary. That,
What's arbitrary?
I don't know, like.
Nothing is arbitrary in the
Like
wisdom of
the
God.
way, there's a proper way to cut your nails in Islam, right? Like,
No.
why is that?
Look, if the
What does
prophet,
God know about that?
if the prophet did in a certain way, look, there are two things. One is prophet's own lifestyle, which does not have an injunction with Muslims, like whether he liked garlic or not, for example. It doesn't mean that you don't eat garlic.
Yeah, so
Yeah. But other things, he gives you how to conduct your life. He gives you the regulations and guidance. Okay, something he would say this is absolutely mandatory, obligatory. There are 5 things. There are 5 categories of actions in Islam. Do you know?
Yeah, I think there's like what's the things that are like haram, things that are. I mean,
Haram is totally prohibited.
Yeah.
Wajib or fard is something mandatory. In the middle is mubah, which is permissible, and in between is encouraged and discouraged. Yeah. So we have all our actions accordingly, and we live our life within this boundary of actions, because we want to be within the grace of God, right? So we are more and more to be encouraging ourselves to do something that's recommended. Try to discourage ourselves to do what is discouraged. Stay away from the prohibited and the forbidden, and fulfill the obligations which are obligatory and mandatory. Anything that's permissible, orange juice, apple juice, it's up to you. No problems.
Yeah, but why even make some things? Why even have rules about those things that are they're not particularly.
Rules and regulations are there for our own good. For example, dietary laws. I mean, if people want to eat a cockroach, they can eat. Some people do, right? Some people do because of. Yeah.
There's no prohibition around that.
No. What I'm saying is, God has spared us by saying to live your life and sustain your life. These are the things which are halal and tayyiba, which are permissible and pure, good for you. So it gives you the categories of dietary intake, which is good and permissible, and something which is impermissible because they're not good for you. God has not prohibited something which is, good. I mean, when I say I want to use double negative, God has not prohibited us something which is not bad, is actually bad. That's why it's prohibited. Consuming blood, dead meat, it's not going to be healthy. Something that's been eaten by a claw of an animal, because you can see how claw of an animal has strangled things and so on and so forth. What happened to the quality of the meat and so on. The quality of meat depends how good or bad depending on how it's slaughtered.
Well, yeah, I have some questions on that actually.
Yeah. I mean, HMC is better than HFA. I mean, if you don't know what that is, Halal Monitoring Committee and Halal Food Authority.
Yeah, because okay, let's come back to that. I have some questions.
Yeah, so fine. So what I'm saying is, God in His mercy has given us the good and the bad and saying these are there, rather than leaving it all to our devices. So the laws are there for our own benefit. The guidance of commands and prohibitions.
So what I don't understand is like, either you specify every single little aspect of your life, or you don't, or do you only care about the big things? What's the? So I feel like Islam
comprehensive.
Yeah, but Islam doesn't say don't eat a cockroach, even though that's bad.
No.
Why would it?
Islam gives you guidance of what kind of food that you cannot eat, what cannot. So there will be categories of.
There's nothing about don't eat insects, is there?
There is hadith about hawam al-ard.
The Prophet has explained. You see, you might just be thinking about the Quran. The Prophet is the one who explains whether you can eat lizard or not, whether you can eat a donkey or a zebra, for example.
But why? So why is it not stated in the Quran only prohibits?
The Quran is, you see, think about it. If Allah were to give a guidance called the Quran with every single details, Quran is not. No. The Quran is going to be the speech of God.
Why is the pig more important than the cockroach? Why is forbidding eating pork more important than forbidding eating the cockroach?
If you look at the differences, How many people eat cockroach and how many people eat pork?
Well, yeah, but lots of people eat insects. Forget about cockroaches, but people eat insects.
How many people,
Asia.
comparatively?
Well, in Asia, quite a lot.
Okay, so you have the world population eating pork and the world population eating insects.
Yeah.
Really, you think they're equal proportion?
I mean, yeah, in Asia, you would find the majority of the population eats both.
Where do they eat?
Like in Thailand, China, if you could, they have like insects like on skewers and stuff on the market.
Okay.
So why would one be more than the other?
What I can think of is this. The revelation looks at, I mean, this is my thinking, I could be wrong, okay? And if it's wrong, this is just my own personal thinking. Legislation that comes with guidance and so on and so forth often deals with the community and their problems and their needs and dictates and so on. I don't see anyone at that time eating cockroaches, from what I can hear.
At the time,
No, I'm saying if there was people eating cockroach like they were eating pigs, like the Christian community was eating, maybe God would have said, don't eat cockroaches in the Quran, right? But because this was left with the Prophet to generalize and say, okay, these are the categories people do it later or another community and so on and so forth. So the Quran, you have to think about this is the foundational principles in which it lays down the ultimate guidance in principles. When it says it's detailed,
the Quran is very detailed about
when it says a detail, it doesn't mean details mean, okay, does the Quran say every kind of food that you can eat? Does it detail every kind of food? Every fruit, every vegetable? It doesn't.
No, yeah, which is why I'm like, why are certain specifically mentioned? And
So I'm just saying, something not important, maybe something that was already consumed at that time. So Quran says, yes, you can eat onions, for example, no problem. Because if something was not eaten, the Quran, from what I think, has not explained that. It's possible. There are various wisdoms you can bring in to say why Quran gives a particular importance to certain things rather than others. God in His wisdom, He knows best. We are human beings, we can speculate about these things, but I'm saying is the principle is there. Halal and tayyiba, pure, they're not good for us. So if you think about now in Christianity, the food laws, did Christ eat pig?
So he was a Jew, so he didn't.
He didn't. But Christians eat pig.
Yeah, because there was a new covenant established with God.
But Christ did not introduce any covenant saying.
I don't disagree with the.
That's why I'm saying Christianity.
I don't understand why certain things would be detailed. Why would the Quran go to the trouble of specifically mentioning certain things and not others? To me, that points to the things that are in the Quran are specifically important and that's not.
I would say it's not importance only. There are reasons and wisdoms behind it. So one of them, as I said, could be the prevalent things that's all around. For example, why does the Quran talk about, for example, do not steal? If you steal, then this is going to be your punishment. Because stealing was rampant in the societies or around the societies.
Yeah, so we're talking about.
Yeah, but there are things that the Quran doesn't talk about. The Quran specifically, does it talk about specifically about smoking?
Well, yeah, precisely. So for me, why would that be?
Because there are people,
people were smoking at the time.
People at that time, maybe people weren't smoking to killing themselves like with an addiction like that. So the Quran gives principles in which do not kill yourself with your own hands. Smoking and consuming all the cigars is killing yourself with your own hands.
So I agree. So I agree with the general principle, following the spirit of something as opposed to the letter of specific actions. So to me, it is the rule is, for instance, don't take care of your body, take care of your mind. Don't do deleterious actions. Don't drink, don't smoke, that kind of stuff.
Thank you, sir.
To say to ban specific actions or to say this is a specific way you need to perform something, to me that sounds weird. I don't understand. Because the Quran doesn't specify it.
Okay, so if you want to live a life in the dictates of God, you try to find the best way to live their life, in the dictates of God. If Prophet was not there, sent, people will be speculating, as we explained before, how best to live our life in the dictates of God. Prophet lived our life for 23 years. 23 years. Whether there's a problem of jealousy and anger and hatred, problem of stealing, killing, murder, rape. Within these 23 years, there's a lot to be learned from the Prophet. That's why Prophet's life example is the best role model. And the Quran says, take him as
he's a good role model. I'm saying role model is not the same as following everything to the letter. It's more about the spirit of what his actions were. He was a good man, he conducted himself well, all that kind of stuff. That's the sort of thing.
So why would the Prophet said, for example, you know what, when you speak to your brother, speak with a smile. Now, why would I not do that? Because the Prophet advised me to do that. There must be some wisdom behind doing this, because the Quran says, وَمَا يَنطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. He does not speak of his own desires. Whatever he does, in fact, everything that he says, وَمَا يَنطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ, he does not speak of his own desires. إِنْ هُوَ وَحْيٌ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. It is but a revelation inspired to him. So whatever the Prophet is teaching is actually through revelation. If the Prophet said, look, this is from my own. We have an example about pollination. You probably heard about pollination. He saw some crops and he said, why don't you do that this way? The next year they didn't got crops. He said, look, this is just from me. I didn't say this was inspired. He made it clear from his own mind, because he was a human being at the end of the day. So he made a difference between his prophetic role and a human role. And he was often reprimanded by the Quran by using his human role. And the Quran says, no, why did you take prisoners or not take prisoners and so on in the Battle of Badr? Because Quran, ultimately God is the one who is giving revelation, and he's the one who is just to manifest through actions. So why wouldn't I follow the Prophet's
I think
as best as I can?
Don't follow the Prophet.
No, as best as I can. Why would I just
follow the spirit of what the Prophet
Of course. To give you an example, you'll hear, Camille, there are certain modern British Muslims, they say, look, when the Quran says, chop the hands of the thieves, what it means is not to punish by cutting their hands. It means stop their livelihood. They will reinterpret it. Yeah, they will find certain groups in the internet, they have a gathering as well. They don't believe in anything which like is Islamic Sharia at all, because all they reinterpret it away by what? By the spirit of the law. Not the law itself.
Do you believe that today we should cut off hands of thieves? Do you think that would be inappropriate?
I am saying whatever God and His Messenger has given in a complete package, that's the best package.
So, for instance, if you go back to the slavery point for a minute, slavery, cutting the hands of thieves, those were at the time of the Quran was revealed, those were acceptable practices. Fine. Then they became no longer acceptable. We live now in a society where those are not the go-to punishment.
Look, in an Islamic society, for example, slavery was all around. Now you have international agreement that we're not going to take any more slaves. The Quran and Sunnah has a provision for that. But in terms of how you deal with a thief, for example, I do not have an international agreement anywhere. Like we have a contract. Anyone who steals is 20 United Nations dollars or euros or pounds, whatever the currency they have. There is no international agreement. Each society...
But there is an international agreement that thievery is wrong and it's banned.
No, what's the punishment?
But the punishment is pretty much the same in all countries.
Punishment is left to individual countries to devise their own punishment.
There's punishment everywhere. In no country is
theft is there everywhere.
Theft is not.
Punishment is left to the individual countries to whether it's going to be imprisonment.
But there's no country in which theft is
no, what I'm saying about punishment, there is no international contracts. Is there? There isn't. So now the Quran says this is the punishment. Okay?
People are still going to do it.
This is the punishment. Why am I going to say no? I'm not going to take that punishment from God, implement it in the land. I'm going to take a punishment which says, you know what, 20 euro fine from another country, another model. No, God has given me a package in which this package, if you have been to, say, even Saudi Arabia, say about 70 years ago, at the time of prayer, when they say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, you hear the adhan, the people with their shops, they don't need a shutter and lock and key. They'll put a piece of cloth over their merchandise, however expensive it is. I'm sorry, time for prayer. If you want to come and pray, if you don't want to pray, you're not a Muslim, wait for us, we'll go. Go to prayer and come back. They had that confidence that this will not be stolen. Not because of there's this law in which they know that it's going to be a really deterrent. Anyone who steals and get caught, their hands will be chopped off, huge deterrent effect. But also the society has been molded in which to say, I have no need to steal. kill.
Yeah.
Because the social system, the economic system provides you the basic necessities of your food, clothing, shelter, and so on. Right.
Society in which you don't.
Right. But that law was there, and that law has also a very important function of deterring. So if, for example, in which you have a country in which a law is this, if you kill someone, the fine is 20 UK pounds. With no disrespect, my brother, he's got 40 pounds. He doesn't like this brother, no disrespect.
Okay.
He kills him, says, I've got another 20 pounds, I can kill another one that I don't like. But if he realized the country is in, if he kills someone, his life will be taken away in return, life for life. He will think twice, oh, I don't like this brother because he didn't smile at me. He's not gonna try to kill him because he knows by trying to kill him, even though the idea came from Satan or from whatever, he would not do that because of the deterrent effect of the law, that he will be punished. He doesn't want to be killed. No one wants to be killed by law. No one wants to be hanged on the cross or crucified, right? So the law has a very much a deterrent effect. And that's why when Islam was implemented, because of all this heavy punishment associated with this very grievous crimes, the crime rate was so low.
Yeah, but so well, I think we're all in agreement that theft is wrong. We're all in agreement that at the time of the Quran, the punishment was cutting off the hands, and in lots of other countries at the time, it was also some sort of bodily punishment, right? You could lose your life, you could be crucified, whatever, including the Roman Empire. Now, a lot of things have evolved since then. Most countries, theft is still wrong, and theft is still illegal, but the punishment has evolved.
Yeah, so Islam gives you a system in which when the whole package is implemented, it will minimize crime as it did before. So it doesn't need to reform to the modern day and say, look, we don't need to implement these laws anymore. We don't need to, for example, you don't need to have, Muslim man marrying 4 wives, up to 4 wives. We don't need any of that. You don't need to eat, I can sterilize the pig in a laboratory, you can have a sterile pork, for example, so we don't need to follow this. You can try and modernize all these things, but Islam will not reform. Why? Because this is the hudud, it's called the boundary set by God. The boundary. We follow. A Muslim is a Muslim who has submitted to the law of God, will of God. And by submitting within the boundary.
If I'm not mistaken, actually, there was in one of the Ottoman Caliphate that actually changed the punishment for theft.
He didn't change the punishment. What he did, the 5th Caliph Umar bin Abdul Aziz, he withheld the punishment because to apply the punishment, conditions have to be met.
Yeah, but
the conditions weren't met because there was famine.
Yeah, but so in practice it wasn't applied. So that's what I mean is that
conditions have to be met. So in an Islamic system, of course, conditions have to be met. You can't just. So I agree with you in one sense. You cannot have 99% kufr, which is non-Islam, and then you want to implement 1% of punishing, cutting off the hands of the thief. That's,
but even in the Ottoman Caliphate, which was majority Muslim, the punishment.
I'm not sure which one, but if that was the case, again, what we are saying is conditions need to be fulfilled for a punishment to be enacted.
Well, so what I'm saying is that the circumstances in which the Quran were revealed, so the Quran was revealed at a particular time at a particular place with a particular set of socio-economic circumstances that evolved, and today we're in a different society.
What has changed? People's greed, jealousy, hatred, anger, desires, they're all taken into account in the final revelation, the final guidance. These things don't change. So whether you were there, 5,000 years ago or now, there are certain human psyche, the human nature doesn't change. Quran legislate laws based on this human nature, which would not change. So it doesn't matter if you go to Africa or Pakistan or China or anywhere, the human nature and driven from this human nature, the things that people are going to do, Islam legislates laws to deal with these behaviors and actions. That's why it's universal. It doesn't have to say like, oh, now we're going by plane, so how am I going to have this law? Incorporates all of that. Because traveling. That's what you're doing. You're just choosing it.
Okay, so actually let's take an example, which is specifically on the halal food.
Yeah.
We were talking about this earlier. At the time, as I understand, halal slaughtering was the more humane way of killing an animal, right?
Slaughtering, yeah.
Yeah, because they were...
And still is.
Well, so is it actually?
Yes.
So why? Because well, actually, there's some nuances to that. But the traditional way is slitting the throat. How is that more humane than stunning the animal?
Sure. What do you mean by humane? Let's understand that first.
Well, it's minimizing the suffering of the animal.
Minimizing suffering. Okay. How do we measure that?
Well, so it was one study that I read where they measured the blood cortisol levels in the blood of the animal pre and before after. So a measure of stress levels basically, and the result was that animals that were slaughtered according to halal guidelines were more stressed at the time of the slaughter than animals slaughtered the traditional way, conventional way.
So when you electrocute something, an animal in the brain, they don't feel stress or pain?
Well, if they
Let's understand something. You give so much electricity, an electric shock to their brain. Are you saying they don't feel pain?
Well, if they're killed instantly.
No, not killing. You have paralyzed them, because that's what slaughtering does. You don't kill the animal, you paralyze the animal by giving so much shock to their brains. Are you saying there's no pain involved?
Well, I mean, do you know?
I have read. Look, I haven't. This is me personally. No, me personally.
That is stunned
No,
by electric.
it's to do with matrix. What are we measuring? I have seen papers.
Cortisol levels.
Look, no. Why blood cortisol level only? I have seen matrix in which they're measuring other things.
Okay, what
So
else?
no. What I'm saying is, look, I haven't gone to the bottom of this because there seems to be papers back and forth. So many
I
papers.
agree, it's
Right.
okay.
So it's an open case for me. I have not gone. So I'm not going to argue for and against. But what I'm saying is, it looks at it's all to do with matrix. How do you measure? For example, Islam says when you are going to bring an animal to be slaughtered, you hide it away from other animals so that when they don't see it and feel pain. Because we know that when they're being slaughtered and they, for example, scream and when they're being dragged or whatever, the other animals understands this and they feel pain. Okay? Even, for example, take the mother away from the child or vice versa, and you see how they're crying. So Islam says no, remove from them and way to slaughter them with the sharpest knives possible. Have you had paper cuts? When did you notice? Immediately or later?
Later, but
Later, always later. Because the paper was so fine, when it cut, we didn't recognize the pain. Only afterwards we recognized the pain. So there was something to do with pain receptors there, the signal that goes there.
Oxygen.
No. Not so convoluted. We are talking about a pain signaling that goes from here to our brain and come back and saying there's something wrong in there. Okay?
cutting your throat is not exactly the same thing as something.
Cutting your throat to cutting your hand doesn't matter. The principle is the same. If something is so sharp and is done very quickly, you should, technically speaking, not feel pain. And what else Islam encourages, as well as the kosher animals? So we're talking about Jewish and Muslims practice. The blood is drained totally. So the blood is, what is death? How does an animal die?
Cardiac arrest or brain.
You need brain death, right? Not
You need one or the other. Actually,
Yeah, sure. So you're draining all the bloods from it. But when you are electric choking and so on and so forth, what happens to the cardiac system and so on? And,
Yeah, it keeps pumping.
Yeah. So we are draining. In fact, that's why in the Jewish Bible they say the life is in the blood. Blood is drained, the life is gone, and so on. Okay. But what we're saying is, when the blood flows from it with a sharp blood, there shouldn't be any pain reflexes, pain responses.
I don't disagree with the way cutting the throat is all fine, but why would you not stun the animal beforehand? Like, for instance, anesthetizing, right? Like, so for instance, you have that with chicken where you can.
But one can easily question, is that an extra suffering involved by electrocuting their brains?
Forget about electrocution. Let's put electrocution
By what, sorry?
aside. So gas, for instance. So you have this thing where you can kill chicken. You can essentially render chickens unconscious.
So anesthesia. So you're giving anesthesia.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
is that also some form of causing suffering?
Why?
No, I'm saying, is it?
Well, why would it not? I don't think it is. So, when you
Anesthesia. anesthetics has its own risk, own side effects.
What, like kidding?
No. I'm not talking anesthesia can kill. There's a percentage probability that you can die from anesthetics, but it's
we're
low.
talking about slaughtering anyway.
But I'm no. I'm talking when you're putting something in a coma and so on of anesthetics, it may have other unusual side effects. So when people do consent in surgery under anesthesia, under general anesthesia, they list, for example, with the consent, these are the things that we might experience. They're not all good effects on your body. Some of them have, because of chemicals we're introducing, they may have. I can give you some side effects straight away from, if you want, because I know the general anesthetics what they are used. But what I'm saying is, why do you want to, if this introduces another level of suffering, that you're causing additional suffering?
But why would it cause additional suffering? I don't understand. So okay, let's take the example. If you have a chicken, you will anesthetize that chicken and then you will slaughter it.
Yeah, but during anesthesia, you are saying they're not suffering.
Well, are you when you're under general anesthesia, do you suffer? No.
At that time, you may not remember. He's just saying, just remembering and so on, but you might physically suffer.
I mean, yeah, but who knows?
No. It's not that.
There's a lot.
There's a lot. Suffering is so many different types.
So what would you?
So you're talking about
in that case, then?
if an animal suffers in the physical body, for example, because anesthetic effects, that's the suffering.
But take the example. So anesthesia is used in humans to perform surgery, right?
Yeah.
Is there? So I mean, there are obviously some problems if you don't do the anesthesia correctly. But if anesthesia is done correctly, you don't suffer during the surgery.
Yeah,
right?
but we try to go under a procedure knowing that there's going to be. So some people may experience suffering from anesthetics. Yeah, some people would not. That's the risk we take, because by having anesthesia, the procedure that we're going to go, that we would not remember and we would not feel the pain. That's the whole idea.
So again, you're saying cutting the throat. I mean, I could say also, some people are, some animals are going to be suffering, some people are not going to.
No, I'm saying this is the least amount of suffering compared to doing that and then killing.